Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 169. My name is NBZ, and if I were a fouler mouth, I would make a rude joke about the episode number, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to bring it up and not mention it. It's like one of those things where people are saying, like I could talk about this thing and then they actually talk about it, like not saying they mean to, but...
It's like we're there now, aren't we?
We're there now. Well, I've already done it. See, I've already broken my own rule. I'm joined by my fellow rule breaker, Bally. Do you want to make a crude joke about 69, Bally, at all?
No.
Okay. Good. This is a clean show, even though we are tagged as explicit on iTunes, mainly because
things slip out here and there, but I think generally speaking, we're fairly clean.
Well, I don't know. I feel like I swearing is like a part of my cadence as a person who talks.
It's also something that's, judging by your old videos, has evolved over the years.
Oh yeah, no. Some of those words you shouldn't use, and certainly not these days at all. And obviously, the world has evolved a lot since back then, and now we know better, and we have grown as people. So yes. Anyway. Hi, this is a Nintendo podcast where we talk about video games, apparently. So we're going to do that today for you. Before we kick off the show, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody who has participated in our survey we did. We've done that last couple of weeks, last month actually, like last two shows we've been talking about it. Got a lot of good responses there. I'm going to go through all those and get some ideas about where to take the show in the future and all that stuff. So thank you very much for shaping the show and giving us your thoughts. It is very much appreciated. And yeah, we'll maybe do one down the line in a couple of years' time. We'll see how it goes. Cool. So here we are. We're talking about video games and stuff. I haven't really asked Bally how he's doing. How you doing, Bally?
I'm good. There's a lot of games out at the moment. It just seems like, especially since buying an Xbox, it's non-stop.
Yeah, you get stuff dropping on you. It's a nice time, even though like all the big budget stuff seems like it's coming a bit more slow down the road. Nintendo in particular has a weird lineup for this year, but we'll probably get onto that in the final.
A weird lineup or a non-existent lineup?
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that in the last segment, I guess. Bally, do you want to lay out the show for what we're going to be talking about today?
Sure. So first segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing. Second segment will be some emails that you have all written into us. And the final segment, we are going to talk about some Nintendo financials that came out very recently and some of their plans as to what they see happening, I guess, in the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Some big fucking numbers. So let me tell you what, who would have expected that Animal Crossing would be the cultural phenomenon that it is? But such is the case. And speaking of which, should we just do a quick, it's lockdown, man. I think everyone's just still playing Animal Crossing. Let's do our 2-minute Animal Crossing check-in.
Okay.
Bally and I have gotten to the point where we're using spreadsheets. It's a nightmare. What's going on, Bally?
Yeah, we just kind of realized that we have a lot of furniture that's really cool that the other doesn't have, and we want to share it with each other. So rather than say, oh, you've got this, I've got this, we've just said, right, we're going to stick it all in a spreadsheet, and you have to order me this, and I have to order you that, and we're just working down our list.
Well, okay, let's talk about the reason for the spreadsheet in the first place, which is Nintendo as Nintendo are, they only allow you to order a maximum of 5 things from the catalogue per day. It's like back in the day when you were trying to transfer Pokemon from Game Boy Advance to Diamond and Pearl, and you had to do them like 5 at a time per day by going into that place and catching them in that little field area, and you just had to keep doing that, and they had a hard limit on it. And it's like, there's no reason for this, Nintendo. I have like 6.5 million bells. I can buy the whole fucking catalogue if I like. Let me just do it all in one fell swoop.
Is it just a very obtuse way to get you to come back on another day? Is that ultimately what they want with this game, just to keep checking in?
It's just stupid, right?
So on top of being able to order and send you 2 things a day, and I can personally order 5 things a day, I can only send you outside of the catalogue 2 things a day. So in total, you're only ever going to get 4 things from me in one day.
Right. Yeah, it's weird, and it doesn't make sense, and yeah, it basically meant that we sat down, and we were like, oh yeah, let's do this, let's knock this out. We sat down for like an hour and a half or whatever, and we got to that point where we're like, oh god, no, we need to make a spreadsheet, man. Now I need to think I need to remind myself every day before I go to bed. Like, oh shit, I haven't ordered Bally's stuff for him today. It's it's a bit of a living nightmare. But it'll be worth it in the end because we'll have very nice kitchens and bathrooms and all that stuff, you know.
Exactly. The aim is that, I mean, I've basically emptied the majority of my rooms where after this process, I can just have all this crazy amount of furniture and just really decorate and make it all look snazzy as possible.
Absolutely. Cool. So that's our Animal Crossing update. We'll probably keep doing that because I've definitely slowed down with Animal Crossing for sure. Like I definitely have got a lot of places that I like really well set up. Like I've got an orchard now, and I have a grand plan for like an outdoor cafe / like Japanese kind of outdoor area that I want to do. But that will take time, and I kind of want to collect all the stuff I need for it maybe before like getting started on it, you know.
I'm prepared to put in the long, hard daily grind of checking on the shop, getting the stuff ordered, and then down the line, as you say, when you've got all the tools at your disposal, to then go really decorative. I feel like going decorative along the way, you are creating more work in a way where for me personally, it's a more rewarding feeling to have that full array of things to pick from at the end and then put them in your town, I guess. So
yeah,
putting in the hard work now, going to get the rewards later. That's what Animal Crossing is about.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, let's talk about a video game what came out on Switch recently, which quite a few people have been playing, and that is Streets of Rage 4. A game I didn't expect at all to play this year. Was not on my radar, really. I'd seen trailers, and I was like, that looks good. Like, it looks cool, but, like, it's not my thing, right? We talk about beat-em-ups, and I think we were having a bit of a chat about, like, when was the last time we played a beat-em-up, right? It was probably for me, well, I've played a few. Like last year, I got a code from Way Forward for River City Girls on PS4, which is a throwback to like River City Ransom. It's much more of a pixely style beat 'em up, more of a throwback in that way. And like it was fun, but like the first boss even was pretty hard, and I struggled with it a lot and died a bunch. And I was like, okay, I kind of put it down.
I'd argue that you're quite into the evolution of beat 'em ups, and I'd see games as like Astral Chain, Bayonetta 2 as kind of like the character action evolution.
Right. So like saying from when we went from 2D to 3D, we kind of moved into character action as opposed to like side-scrolling beat 'em up. Yeah, right. Sure. Yeah. That's true. Yeah, I am into those games. I like those games a lot more for their style and their nonsense than their difficulty, which is the same with beat 'em ups because I'm just straight up bad at these types of games. It's weird because, like, so we grew up and we played Jackie Chan on GBA, which was a side-scrolling beat 'em up, and I love that game. Like, it's really good fun, and it's all about like learning moves and combos. And there was that one training arena room that you could use to test out your moves, and like there was one move where you ran up a wall and did a backflip off the wall and stuff like that. That was a lot of fun. And then since then, like, I haven't really fell in love with one. I played Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, was on a PlayStation Plus game in the PS3 era. And I played some of that. That was pretty cool. Like, I'd like that film as well. But, it was... I think my problem with a lot of these games is they're too throwbacky. They're too adherent to like the live systems and the punishing difficulty of the NES era of like River City Ransom and original Streets of Rage and those types of things. I really want these games to evolve a bit more and to give me a bit more leeway. Yeah. And that's why I think Streets of Rage 4 really connected with me, because not only is it just fucking gorgeous, like, oh my goodness, I love how good this game looks. But it has accessibility in terms of, I just played it on easy and it was a blast. Like, right, I still had a good challenge to it and I was dying a decent amount in terms of, I think on normal you start with 2 lives and on easy you get 6 lives. So it's definitely a bigger buffer and you probably take less damage and do more damage, that type of thing as well. So it was overall just a way smoother experience than I ever experienced in a beat 'em up to this day. Even though mechanically it is kind of it still has that like weird stiffness that beat 'em ups have.
Yeah, I mean, I think my history with beat 'em ups is maybe a little bit more limited. I was very into that Jackie Chan game, and then we were talking back and I was thinking about Star Wars Episode 3, the movie tie-in, which is an actual...
Yeah, so you were mentioning this to me, and because I played Episode 2 on GBA, there was an Attack of the Clones game, which was much more of a action platformer. And I thought that your DS Revenge of the Sith game was just similar to that, the same thing, but it's not.
Right, and then it's very different. It's like this beat-em-up game with full 3D ship combat missions in between and everything. Like it's a pretty good game. I enjoyed it. And then like I did back in the day, I would often trade games in stupidly now because I'd love to go back and try those games. But yeah, no, so my experience was pretty limited. I played this game on easy as well, and I'm arguably equally as bad at them, I would probably say.
Yeah, I think we're both like just, I don't know what it is. I'm just not good at beating
Yeah,
ups.
I mean, I found it pretty hard. I only game overed once, but I was losing a lot of lives. There were some enemies that were just kicking my ass, and that's fine. I found it very strange that the game doesn't have like a block function, because there are actually enemies that can block, and it feels kind of strange when you're either away from an enemy knowing that you're safe, or you're up in their grill and doing damage, and there's not much in between. I also think I wasn't the best at working out the best way to get people in the air in order to combo them. It would normally it would happen more or less by accident. It wasn't kind of right, I'm going to get this person in the air and I'm going to rebound. I wasn't overly thinking a lot of the manipulation of sort of bodies around the stage, maybe apart from using a specific move to boot someone out a window a few times, and that was really cool. But
yeah,
so I was kind of just rolling with it and really enjoyed it, but understanding that this really isn't my genre and that I'm very bad, and that it's like a very low entry to kind of play the game and have a good time, but you can really tell that there's a real mastery to some of the timings and when to engage and when to pull back and that kind of thing. And like someone like Chris Scullion, for example, he was talking about there's actually timing differences between the Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox versions of this game, and that it's not strictly the same game. He was finding real different timing, and he's someone who I guess who's played a lot more beat 'em ups. He's much more knowledgeable about classic style of games, which is this very much is in those styles. So it's interesting that he thought the Xbox One version, which is the one that I played, he said that the timing windows were a bit smaller, so maybe that made it a bit more challenging.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's interesting because you definitely start to learn that you need to mix things up when the enemies get a bit trickier in terms of using grabs when they're blocking, right? It's a very, like, there's a classic fighting game thing, right? If someone's blocking, you grab them to get them out of it. And then you can, but I found it sometimes tricky to know when to, like, how I would toss them over my shoulder, or like when I would like hold them in front of me and beat them up in front of me, and then throwing them forward. Just like grabbing someone, sometimes it would happen when I wasn't even pressing the grab button, and I don't know the mechanics of that, or like how that really worked.
Yeah, it wasn't, I never mastered it either. It was almost like a lot of accidental grabbing and throwing.
Right, totally.
Going on.
That definitely happened. But like when you get that going, and I played mainly as Blaze, who I really liked in terms of her special moves. She has one that's basically like a Kamehameha blast that shoots forward and it knocks enemies back. If you knock them near the wall, they'll do like a wall bounce, essentially. So they won't go off screen. They'll knock against the wall, even if there's no wall there. It's just like the screen acts as a barrier almost. And then they'll get knocked into the air, and then you can just jab them while they're in the air and kind of keep them there for a little while. But then me not really being that good at fighting games or even beat 'em ups, trying to keep them in the air, like keep that juggle going, was tricky because I didn't know like what's the follow-up to that. Like how do I lock them into this kind of string of moves that I do the most damage possible for a given situation, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, and I sort of tried each character for one stage and then just picked my favorites. So the 5 characters like Axel, Blaze, Floyd, Cherry, Adam. I liked Axel the best, and look at me again, Captain Vanilla.
Wow, Mr. Vanilla, how surprising.
I really liked his aerial special move, and it's sort of when he jumps in the air and then he does like this spin in the air and charges forward and then ends with like this big punch. And what was so great about it was it's just a ton of invincibility frames for literally the point at which you're jumping to the end of your punch. You're more or less invincible, which for the majority of the enemies that were more difficult was a godsend. So I sort of really appreciated just kind of mastering that character, especially in the later stages where I think for me as a complete beat 'em up noob, it was much more rewarding to try and get good with one character to take on the hardest levels in the game, even on easy, obviously. But so I kind of worked out, right, this move is my go-to invincibility kind of safe place, safe move, I guess. And then he's got like a great combo of punches and kicks and things as well as that. And he's got one move that is quite consistent at getting characters in the air. It's like just a upper cut hook, if that's a thing. I don't know, fighting.
Boxing terminology,
Boxing
who knows?
thing.
Yeah, because like there's the move where you double tap forward, then press the attack button.
Yeah.
Which that's like a different, that doesn't use up your special meter or whatever. Well,
no.
so the interesting thing about this game is you don't really have a special meter. You basically, whenever you use a special move, your health gets knocked down, but it's not fully knocked down. It's like, it's almost a buffer window of like, if you get hit while your health is being taken away from you from a special move, you'll get loads, even more damage taken off you. But if you bash the enemy after you've used your special move, you'll get your health back. So it's this risk reward of like, okay, I can just spam special moves a bunch, and as long as I'm able to get my health back, that's fine. Like there's no loss there, but it's very tricky if you're in the later stages and like you're using a bunch of special moves, you get hit, you get taken down way more than you would have otherwise, right? Your health goes even further down. So it definitely makes you maybe a little bit antsy in some of the boss fights of like, oh, should I use the special move here? Is it really worth it? And obviously you got like your super move as well, which you pick up stars in the stage.
I completely forgot about that bite in the last few stages.
Yeah, I'd use the super move on those bosses a bunch because they were helpful. Wow. Definitely took a good amount of health off them, although like not a huge amount. Like those super moves for me were generally a bit more helpful when I was getting swarmed by multiple enemies, because they're usually area of effect type things where they do a bunch more damage. But yeah, so I tried out all the characters as well. I enjoyed Cherry. She has some fun stuff because some of the characters don't...
The guitar, and she's very fast.
Yeah, so Blaze and I don't believe Axel, they can't run when you double tap the forward, the analog stick.
I think Cherry's the only one who can.
Yeah, so she can run when you double tap, which is one of those things that I kind of expect from this style of game. So she is much more mobile, and she has a special move where she like slams into you with her guitar and does like a knee slide, which was pretty cool. And then Floyd I liked quite a bit because he obviously very slow, very lumbering, but when he grabs people and bashes them, they just die so fast because he's way more powerful. Because he's a giant robot man and he's got these huge arms, just bulky dude. And I really liked his side special because you can basically grab someone, bring them to you, and instantly just punch them a bunch and get your health back straight away. So it's almost like a risk-free special, which was great and really helpful for closing the distance with him. Because again, you know, enemies will move much faster than him, and it's harder to hit them and get them in your range. And like this beat 'em up still has that type of issue that I tend to have, which is it's not a full 2D plane. Like, you're moving up and down with 2D characters, and so lining people up exactly can get a little bit tricky. It's nowhere near as bad as it was in River City Girls, but it's still...
when they attack you at a diagonal angle.
Right, exactly. And sometimes you pick up items like the spear, which kind of goes across the way, but it's like not super clear how far across the way it goes, so you can knock down 3 people, like, who are horizontally, or vertically, I should say, on different planes to one another. But it's just like working out what that kind of hitbox is almost is tricky. Speaking of items, though, one of the things I thought was fantastic about this game was throwing items and then grabbing them again, and throwing and grabbing and throwing and grabbing. You throw a lead pipe at someone, or a metal pipe, and it knocks off them and it bounces back towards you, and if you're close enough you can press the grab button again and grab it out of midair, and it feels just like Smash Brothers. It feels like in Smash Brothers where I have the bat and I throw the bat at you and then I grab the bat again. Like, it's that kind of feeling that I love.
Did you find enemies catching the weapons as well, though?
Yeah, later on there are enemies who fucking, if you throw it at them, they'll catch out of midair, and I was like, oh shit, I can't rely on this anymore, because there were certainly times where I was getting swarmed by people, and I just stand there in the middle and go, throw to the left, throw to the right, throw to the left, throw to the right, and just like bang, 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 just taking people out with these throws, and it was so satisfying. Like, probably my favorite mechanic in the game was that throwing and catching stuff. It was just amazing. And like, I can't say enough good about the animation, the artwork. Like, I tweeted about this, but like, can you imagine if Konami made a Contra game that looked like this? Like, instead of the garbage Contra game they put out last year, which was just the ugliest thing on the planet. Oh my goodness, I would lose my mind if they made a Contra game that looked like this. Holy shit. It really like cements that idea of like, I am so far in the camp of give me an Ori or Rayman Legends style, hand-drawn art style, any day of the week. It is just... And one of my favorite things, like it's such a small detail, but at the end of a level when you play as Blaze, she does this like flick of her hair, and it's like one of the best animations I've ever seen. It is so good. I don't really know how to explain it other than every time I finished a level, I was looking forward to seeing that animation because it was so clean. It was just amazingly done. So yeah, I was really surprised. I was knocked off my feet about how much I liked this game because, as we've said, like this isn't our genre. This isn't what we usually go for. But I think it's hit that good level of people who like Streets of Rage will like this because it definitely has that difficulty if you want to go there. If you want to pump it up to Maniac, you can go ahead and do so. It has the unlockable characters from the old games. It has a kicking soundtrack. It has all the stuff that they want, but it also has such a great entry point for people who aren't into this type of game. And obviously, with Game Pass, it's just such a great thing to jump in and try. Like, that was the kind of lifting of the barrier almost that made it so easy to give it a go.
Yeah, totally. When a game comes along that's on Game Pass, that's obviously come out this year, that reviews well, and on top of that is like a short experience, is like a 2 to 4 hour campaign.
Yeah,
it's like I will happily play as many of those in a given year as possible, really, even if it's a genre that's way outside my comfort zone like this game was.
Totally. So yeah, it's on Switch. Check it out. It's maybe a little pricey on Switch. It's like 20 quid. But it depends
again.
Yeah, but it does depend on your mileage, right? For me, that's too much because I'm the sort of person who plays it through once and is done with it. But if you're a Streets of Rage person,
we might co-op it later. But I see.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we've got plans to do that hopefully down the line. Like maybe play it through on normal and see if we can do it on normal together. That would be a fun challenge. But if you're the type of person who, like, you're a Streets of Rage fan, like, that's fine, because you're going to get, like, probably 50 hours of fun from this game of just playing through it on every difficulty, unlocking all the extras, like, just going through it again and again, do the arcade mode, loads of that stuff, right? So I think it's really cool, and they've done just a bang-up job with it. I think Lizard Cube worked on this. They did the remake for the Monster Boy games that came out recently on Switch that have another gorgeous art style. And it was also Guard Crush, I believe, and Guard Crush made Streets of Fury or something that was another game that was in this style. So it's like kind of a collaboration between studios, but it's come out fantastically, I think. What a great game.
Very cool.
Sweet. Bally, you finished Final Fantasy VII.
I did.
Well, you didn't finish Final Fantasy VII, the original. You
remake.
finished, let's say, I don't know,
10.
1/5 of a potential generation-spanning series of Final Fantasy VII remakes as they go.
I really loved this game, more or less start to finish. There are weak moments. I think there's to my surprise, I think there's genuinely only one unfair boss in the entire game. And as someone who's very... I'm very precise about what I like in JRPGs, and I don't like bosses to be too difficult. I don't like them to be overcomplicated. I think this was just my cup of tea in terms of difficulty, and I played the whole game on normal, and it worked perfectly for me. I thought,
you didn't have like an end game boss that just stops you in your tracks, right? That usually will happen.
No, and I was totally expecting one, and I admit I had to be at my absolute best to take on that final boss, but it wasn't this whole kind of game-breaking Xenoblade 1 experience of 10 hours of playing against the final boss trying to beat that damn game. But so yeah, it was really positive. Story-wise, I think the characters are great. The story is great. I think for me, obviously, there's a lot of real big unknowns that I'm left being like, oh, I wonder what that's going to lead to. But I kind of feel
so like coming out the end of this game, a lot of people on the internet are like, if you haven't played the original, you'll have no idea what's going on. And like, I'm thinking to myself, like, yes, but also I don't know if you have that perspective because you know that it will be explained eventually, or what? Like, is it unsatisfying to you as an ending because you just don't know what's happening?
No, because it's like watching a Star Wars trilogy, you know? Like, it's like Force Awakens, sequel trilogy is a bad example. Let's say Episode 1 is a great film in my view unto itself, but as a trilogy of films, I think it's a more rewarding experience in terms of story. That's not to say the story of Episode 1 is diminished because there's more story to come. I think you can, for me, I feel like I enjoyed this game. I enjoyed the story it told, and I I'm satisfied that there are things I don't know about that will be revealed in the future games. Like, I think you can enjoy it on both levels in that sense. And I don't think I think it's perceived that they overly dangle the carrot to say, like, all this stuff you don't know about, isn't that make you want to play the future games? And sure, I do, but that doesn't mean that this experience is detracted from in any way, really. Like, I'm still feel like I've gotten a lot out of it, and I know you've been very frustrated because you want to discuss a lot of the stuff that links to the later parts of the original, and I've already said, like, I might play the original game in the next 5 years or however long it takes for the next game to come out.
Well, like, the thing is even if you play the original, I don't know that you'll get the full understanding of what's going on here. And I personally didn't until I watched, like, the Easy Ally spoiler cast with Maximilian dude, who's like this hardcore Final Fantasy fan.
Oh, sure. I just mean, like, I could play it and then watch the same spoiler cast and things to get up to date on theories and things. I see what you're saying.
Right. Yeah, like, because, like, so much of the shit is like, have you played Crisis Core? Did you watch Advent Children? Right? Like, you kind of have to have this wide-ranging universal knowledge of the Final Fantasy VII oeuvre in order to know exactly what they are doing with this game. But suffice it to say, if they intended all that shit, it's fucking mind-blowing. Like, it is just, it's ridiculous, and it enhances my appreciation for what this game already was, which, as is a standalone, just talking about that story through Midgar is great. Like, and the thing that I worry about is, like, do they go off the rails now because they kind of open things up at the end to be like, well, we could change things even more at this point for reasons, right?
Yeah.
Do they do that, or do they rein it back in? And I think there was an interview with Katase and people saying that, look, we're not going to change stuff too much. It's probably going to still hit all the same beats from the original. Don't worry about it. But, you know, you can't really trust what people say when they say stuff like that, because Neil Druckmann lied about playing Ellie in The Last of Us, right? Like, they'll say whatever they want just to get people to think a certain way so they can surprise them later. It's weird. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed it a lot. How do you feel about, like, some of the side quest stuff? Because I think that's probably the complaint most people have, is, like, they feel it's a little over bloated with some of those things.
I mean, have these people played side quests in other JRPGs? Like, I thought they were...
Well, yeah, I think that's the problem, is, like, these people have played MMOs and have played JRPGs, and they're like, look, The Witcher 3 exists. That game showed you how to do side quests. Why can't you do it like that? And obviously, much more difficult to just pull off what The Witcher 3 did.
Sure.
But you know what I mean. It's been done well before.
I thought they were absolutely fine. I enjoy, like, the little character stories that they tell with different NPCs, and sure, a lot of them might just be go to this point, kill that beast, and come back. But that's what you do in JRPGs. You go and kill beasts and you engage in story. Like, I don't personally have many qualms with, like, what they went for here. I thought they developed the world well.
I think it definitely depends on how much you enjoy the experience of the game. If you're really into the game, it's like an excuse to just keep playing it and do more stuff, right?
Yeah, and I loved the fight system. I loved the world, and those are the two main things you're engaging with when you're doing these side quests. You're exploring more of the world, and you're ultimately engaging in more combat and more fights. And I loved that from start to finish. Like I said, apart from one boss.
Yeah, and then they do this stupid thing in, like, chapter 14 where they're like, here's a materia that's a pedometer. You walk 5,000 steps, and I was like, all right, I guess I'll just run around everywhere and not use fast travel just so I can unlock this stupid materia, this pedometer materia. And it turned out to be a thing I just didn't end up using anyway. But hey, it kind of tricked me. The game got me to run around. So well done, Final Fantasy.
But generally, as someone who's gone blind into these characters, I think the voice acting by and large is very strong. I think maybe Cloud is one of the weakest characters. But
well, I feel like Cloud is just... he doesn't talk much, right? Like, he's quiet and stoic, and he doesn't, like, he's socially awkward as well. Like, there's this whole sequence with Aerith where like they're trying to do high fives with one another, and it is incredibly awkward because Cloud just doesn't have the social cues.
It's the way that I get that he's flat at the start, but I would have liked to have just seen a little bit more development, especially when there's more emotive scenes.
Well, this is the problem, right? Because, like, he gets that development in the original game, and that takes place over 35 hours or so. But, like, this game is 40 hours, and you've only got, like, the first fifth of his development as a character. Like, you haven't even cross the threshold of what's going on with Cloud, right?
I agree,
So,
but I think the other characters you encounter do develop more in that space of time. And I'm not saying...
I wouldn't say so. I would say that those characters are already fleshed out a bit more from the start, right? Like, I feel like Tifa doesn't really change that much. Barrett is kind of the same all the way through. Aerith has more going on with her. You can definitely tell she knows shit. Like, there's something weird happening with her. So, like, I feel like it's just those characters have more to say and are more fleshed out from the offset. I wouldn't say they really go through arcs in this game overall. I can't really see any arcs for them, but I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something.
I don't know. I felt more of an arc, even if I can't explain in what ways. And I agree that they are just naturally more animated in this game. But yeah, I loved all that stuff. I thought the world building was fantastic. One thing I would have liked to have seen more of is, so at the very start of the game when you're on the plate and you see like just the way that it's depicted, it's like this, it's almost like a traditional European style combined with Japanese style. Like there's a lot of different cultural styles melded together with Midgar, which I just think is awesome. And I would have liked to have seen more on the plate. That's all. You spend almost all, like 80% of the game in the slums under the plate,
right?
And I would have liked to have seen a bit more on the plate, but they're not going to change something as substantial as that, perhaps. Maybe that's the wrong thing to say because they're going to change lots in theory.
Yeah, they will.
But yeah, I just loved the world building. I thought Midgar and the dynamics of the message, the story about, eco-terrorism and the politics of it all, and learning a lot more about Shinra and seeing how their internal workings operate. Like there's a lot here.
I like the stuff with Wutai, because like Wutai in the original game, like it's there and you go there and stuff, but like it's not really played up as a thing. Like the war between Wutai and Midgar, it's I feel like they're gonna go somewhere with that, which is interesting, I think.
Yeah, no, and I've got lots of theories about where I think they're going to go, and that's not based on things I've seen on the internet. It's based on like just lines that people have said,
right?
NPCs and some of the stuff they've been hinting at, which I think is interesting. I can maybe theorize about some of that off mic, but like, this is sort of my surprise of the year so far. It was a game I was really skeptical that I would like. I had zero engagement with, like Final Fantasy VII. As I said before, the demo sold me, and then I beat like a 40-hour game in, I don't know, 3-4 weeks, which
I think it's 3 weeks, yeah.
3 weeks, which for me is pretty quick, honestly. And like that's on top of all the Animal Crossing we've been playing and other things. Yeah. So I absolutely loved it. And even if it is going to be a very long wait for part 2, I definitely got a lot out of this first sight. Yeah.
Sounds good. Cool. The last thing we'll talk about in this section is Mega Man 5, the 5th Mega Man. I went back and listened to myself talk about Mega Man 4 because I forgot everything about it, basically, on the show. Because I talked about Mega Man 4.
When was that show?
Oh, I don't know. It was like 120 something. It wasn't too long ago. But basically, I've owned the Mega Man Legacy Collection on Switch for ages, and I keep seeing these sales on like the Castlevania Collection, on like the Mega Man X Legacy Collection, and I'm like, no. Amy said, don't be stupid. Stop spending your money on collections when you've not even finished the first collection that you bought. So in a rare moment of restraint for me, I've gone back and am attempting to finish the last couple of Mega Man games I have left. So yeah, I've played all 4 of the previous ones. So 5 was the next one up on my list.
Is 5 Super Nintendo?
No, they're all NES.
All NES.
So Mega Man 1 through 6 are NES games. I think 7 is a PlayStation game and 8 is also a PlayStation game, and then 9 and 10 were WiiWare / Xbox Live Arcade games, but 9 and 10 look exactly like 1, 2, 3, 4, basically. They're basically like retro modern games, or modern retro games, right? They're like, what if we made it look exactly like the NES games, but they made them in 2009? So the Mega Man Legacy Collection 1 has 1 through 6, and then Mega Man Legacy Collection 2 has 7, 8, 9, and 10. And yeah, so all these NES games still. And Mega Man 5, I was delighted by. I was really surprised by how good this game is, compared especially because I didn't remember anything about 4. 4 was very unmemorable to me. I didn't think any of the weapons were that crazy. And in 4, they introduced the charge beam. And I went back and I was like, because 5 has a charge beam as well. And in 5, I'm tearing shit up with the charge beam. The charge beam is great. It's like my favorite thing in the world. I use it on all these enemies. And like the reason it's so good is because it's kind of circular. It has like a good density to it. And so when you shoot it out, it's more likely to hit enemies. And I went back and I checked. The charge beam in Mega Man 4 is more like a thin line. It's more like a beam as opposed to like a blast, right? And a blast is much more effective because it has a larger radius, which means it hits much more. So the charge beam in Mega Man 5 is just like way improved, which instantly makes the game a bit more approachable and easier, especially because all these games are really, really hard, right? I'd say 2 is probably the easiest game, mainly because it has a difficulty select at the start, and the difficulty select is like normal and hard. Hard is like the regular Mega Man difficulty for every other Mega Man game, whereas normal is basically like, hey, for you people in the West, here's a version of Baby's Mega Man, basically. That's why Mega Man 2 is way easier. But all the subsequent games after that, they didn't do a difficulty slider, which was, I don't know why, they should have included it. But it means that when you fight bosses, you really do have to use the weaknesses against them in order to take them down. And overall, I don't know, I do think that there is some... Like, you can look at all these games and say they're all the same, but playing through this game, I got a sense of the level design is just much fairer. It's more balanced. There's less kind of bullshit that jumps out at you. It feels like you can anticipate things a bit more, and it feels like the enemies are much easier to figure out, and if they hit you a couple of times, it's much easier to, well, especially on the Legacy Collection, to just hit the rewind button. This is one of the things that was helpful when we were playing Contra on Super Nintendo. It was annoying because we kept having to hit the stupid button to go to the save state and go back to it. And rewinding on the Super Nintendo Classic is just a pain in the arse. It's not, like, I wish they had mapped it to buttons or something. The great thing about this Legacy Collection is, like, the rewind button is literally on the shoulder, so you just hold it down and it rewinds you back through. And especially on some of the stupid bosses, you're just like, no, man, I'm not doing this. I'm just going to rewind to undo that damage I just took, and now I know where that ball is going to bounce, and I'll avoid it instead of getting hit by it. And sure, you can call it cheating or whatever, but for me, like, I like these Mega Man games a lot, but I don't want to spend 9 hours just doing it, just getting through it first time. And, you know, I don't think Mega Man 5 is that difficult, but it definitely has challenge later on. And one of the things it introduces is, I don't know if this was in the previous game, but it has letters. So there'll be hidden letters. They're not really hidden. They're just like hard to get throughout the stages that spell out Mega Man 5. And like V is one of the letters.
Very
so V,
Donkey
Mega
Kong.
Man V. Yeah, like Donkey Kong. But they're all spread throughout the different levels. And if you collect all of those, you get a special weapon called Beat. Beat is the little kind of robot bird who follows Mega Man around sometimes. And Beat is really helpful because he'll just go and attack people for you. Unfortunately, I didn't collect all the letters. So you know how you go online and you're like, what's the weakness of this Mega Man boss? And it says Beat. And I'm like, I don't have Beat. How do I get Beat? And it turns out that I'd missed some of the letters, so I didn't have him by that point in the game. So like those bosses in particular, there's one which is just like a pain in the ass because I didn't have Beat, and so I'm trying to hit this guy with my charge beam, but like jumping out the way and dodging. So I used the rewind a lot on that one, just because it was a tricky situation. But overall, it's great. Like for me, it stuck with me a lot more. I like a lot of the different weapons you have. One of them is the charge kick, which is the slide, right? So they introduced the slide in 3, which allows you to duck under enemies. The charge kick is a slide that does damage, which can be tricky because like sometimes you'll hit someone and then go inside them, and then they'll damage you because their hitbox is on top of you. And you're like, oh, for God's sake, that's a bit stupid. But then there's other ones like gravity hold, where depending on like this one boss who like flies through the air, he'll just take damage if you just use it. You just use it and it just hurts him because he's flying, and that's helpful on some of the flying enemies. It's overall just like one of them's like a water wave, like a kind of surfing wave that goes across the ground, and it actually takes out projectiles that are coming at you as well as hitting the boss. So it's got a great lineup of weapons. It's much more streamlined in terms of the level design and more fair. It doesn't do the Mega Man 3 thing, which I really disliked, where after you beat the 8 robot masters, you get 4 more levels where you have to go through these super long gauntlets with 2 bosses per level, and it's just a fucking nightmare. People love Mega Man 3. It's probably my least favorite because it's so fucking hard. It's like unforgivingly hard in a way that it's like kicking you in the balls 5 times in a row. It's that painful. Whereas 4 is okay. I'd say 5, and for me, after having played this, I would say 5 is my second favorite Mega Man game after Mega Man 2. It's really, really impressed me, and it's funny because no one talks about it, but I really enjoyed it. I thought it had great variety all the way through, just a solid Mega Man entry, and mainly that charge beam. That charge beam is just fantastic. I'm all about it. So Mega Man 5, it's good. I like it a lot. One more to go. Beat Mega Man 6, and then I'm finally allowed to buy another collection, Bally. Hold me to it. Don't let me go astray.
And you want to buy that Castlevania collection? Is that what you got your eye on?
Yeah, so I'm kind of going back and forth between the Contra collection and the Castlevania collection.
And they're both on Switch.
I wish the Contra collection had online so we could both just play Contra games online.
Cool.
That would be nice. But I think one of us should have the Contra collection so that
Next
at some
time
point
we hang out, we can
play through them. Yeah, exactly. That's Mega Man 5. That's going to wrap us up for the first section of the show. Thanks for listening. We'll be back after the break with your emails.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the second segment on today's show. That means it's time for emails. We put out the call, we put out the cry. I was going to say, what was it called? The Horn of Gondor.
Yeah, I was
watching Lord of the Rings. What's it called when they light up all the fires?
I don't know what it's called, but they do the thing where everyone knows eventually. It's like chainmail almost. It's like sending a letter across the next person, and eventually someone finds out.
I think they just call it the Cry of Gondor or something.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You see, if you're a basic bitch, you talk about the Horn of Gondor. If you're an intellectual, you talk about the Horn of Valir. But that's for the Wheel of Time fans out there.
All right. I thought that was like a niche Lord of the Rings thing. I was like, for God's sake, here we go.
No.
Anyway, we put out the call of TNL and it worked. Rohan came to our aid and we got some emails and some messages on Discord. So
Gandalf crested the hill. Helm's Deep was saved.
Exactly. Minas Tirith is safe.
But the last battle is still to come. Tarmon Gaiden is upon us, right? So we still need more emails. This isn't the end. Please send us more.
Yes, the ring is still in existence. This is a tangent and a half, but our first email...
Did you even say the email? I don't even know.
Oh, yeah, I should say the email address, which is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@Rohan.com. Please send
please don't pull a James Jones on this. Oh, dear Lord.
Our first email was from Jackpot, who sent us one on Discord, who says... Hey guys, changing things up a bit this time with some questions about podcasting instead of Nintendo. I hope this is a nice change of pace and that you're both staying safe and indoors. So I thought we could do these one by one.
Sure.
There's quite a few here. So, what are you most proud of about TNL?
That we're still doing it. I don't know.
I think for me it's definitely to do with longevity, the fact that we do have consistent listeners and that's there's a growing community. I think all of those are really awesome, and that I think the length at this point is just kind of surprising if you compare it to how we felt about the show on day one. Perhaps it's very surprising that we just kind of have kept up our consistency, which I think is the most crucial thing with any creative project, more or less, if you want to grow a following, is consistency. So
yeah,
that'd be my one.
I think we just make a good show, and like that's not being arrogant or something, but like when I've made a lot of stuff in my life, like creatively on YouTube, all this stuff, and I can often tell if I like something, if I think it's like when I watch it back and I'm like, that was good, like if that happens to me, then often I feel like a lot of people respond to that stuff, right? So I think if you find something that you have made to still be good, then that will often mean that other people will like it. And I think like I edit the show, the main show, you do like the Patreon stuff as well, but like when I listen back to the show, I usually listen back to it like a bunch, like 2 times speed or whatever. I listen back to it and I'm like, I enjoyed listening to that show again, even though it's like my own voice a lot of the time. It's one of those weird things, right, Bally? People always talk about how they talk into microphones and stuff and they hear their voice and like, oh, I hate my own voice, and like I'm the opposite. I fucking love my own voice. It's like very silly.
That's one thing that's changed about me over the course of the show, is that you edit the main show, yes, and I will listen to every single episode when it comes out, and like so I get very used to the sound of my own voice, and that's a hurdle I crossed a long time ago, and it's just so I know what I sound like, how we're sounding, like bouncing off each other. Should I have made a point about this there? What should I said or shouldn't have said? And that's to help me kind of self-improve. I think if you never listen to yourself back, then you're always going to, in some ways, on a certain level, stay more the same. And it's important for me, at least, to like evolve and kind of change. And that's how I kind of do that. That's part of how I do that, at least.
Yeah, for sure. It's a weird process of like getting yourself in your ears often, but I'm just so used to it at this point that it doesn't faze me at all. Right? Like it's just, I think a lot of people who don't do this type of stuff, they hear themselves and like, I don't sound like that to myself. It's weird, but I'm used to it now.
What is a short-term goal for the show?
I don't know, a few things, right? Like we're doing a lot of the stuff this year in terms of, we did the survey and we're like trying to figure out what do people like about the show, what are they into.
We realized that it's very, and we've been going obviously since 2013, it's very easy to just get in your stride of, this is the show we do, and we're just going to keep going and
do the same thing all the time.
Same thing all the time. And I think it is important to step back and be like, what's working, what's not working. So this year we decided to do like a 2020 TNL review where we just kind of assess all aspects of the show. So one part of that was, for example, moving hosts, which doesn't really affect listeners, but it was a really painful thing.
It was a fucking pain in the arse, let me tell you. It was very stressful as well, because like... Right. I like having access to the entire catalogue of podcasts. Like, when I started listening to podcasts, a very important thing for me was I listened to Podcast Beyond, I listened to RFN, and I went through their back catalogue and I just listened from the beginning, basically, all the episodes, all in a row. And so for me as a person, like I'm very much into, if I get into a podcast, I will often, not these days because I listen to so many podcasts now, but back in the day, I would go back and listen through the entire catalogue of stuff. And so not having that there, and especially because a lot of people have mentioned to me, and I think have talked about the show in the past, of it's kind of an evergreen show in the sense that because we often talk about older games as well, it's not always just here's the new thing we're talking about. And even then, like it's interesting historically, and it tends to be like we do news a bunch in the third segment, but we often do like feature topics that are more timeless, right? So it's more of a type of show that you can go back to and listen, and it's not necessarily all going to be out of date. And even if it is, it's still interesting historically. Yeah,
totally. And we've always sort of kept a mix, which is quite good. Another sort of short-term goal is obviously as part of the sort of TNL review is the survey that is potentially going to be closed by the time you're listening to this. But we had like loads of responses on that survey, loads of questions that loads of you have answered, which is awesome. And a lot of our short-term and long-term goals are going to come from discussions we have about the results of that survey. So like there's definitely going to be stuff down the line that potentially might be different. A lot of stuff will obviously stay the same. We need to have that discussion, but just to give you a heads up that's kind of the process. And there's other stuff on that list that I won't go into of our review, but just kind of checking in on aspects of the show, that making sure we're happy with them, that you're happy with them, that this is how we want the show to continue.
Yeah, it's one of the things, like I look to a place like Giant Bomb, which we talk about all the time, but I think they are very smart in that they have those core pillars that will always stay the same. They always have quick looks. They always have the same podcast weekly, all this stuff. But a lot of the other stuff they do is always being shaken up, right? Like, there's lots of series they did, like This Is the Run, which I loved, but eventually that has to end and they're going to move on to something else. They're not always going to do the same stuff again and again because they want to surprise the audience and they want to give them something new and different. And I think that is important, right? To always be on your feet and not just stay safe. If, as Gary Whitta says, if you're not making moves, you're standing still, I think is
right. And I think our survey will help in answering those questions, where we're going to get a good understanding of what is most important to you as listeners and what some of the stuff that's maybe less important that we can kind of change it up and do new things that keeps the podcast fresh. So next question was like, what are the long-term goals? We've kind of talked about that they're kind of going to stem from that survey stuff. What are some lesser known podcasts you guys enjoy?
Let me think. There's a few. If we're talking about video game podcasts, there's one that I got turned on to recently that is called Into the Aether, and it was Timur from GameSpot who mentioned it on a podcast and said that it was just like, is this a cool podcast about this kind of, I would say similar to ours, and it's like it's two friends just talking about video games, but they're like they're American guys, and I think one of them's based in New York, and I think he works for Marvel actually, and they basically they're very positive. Like, they just get really into video games and talk about them in depth, and they'll have like bonus episodes where they did like a 4-hour episode on Three Houses, and they've been really into Persona 5 and talking about
Are they quite
Animal
cross-platform
Crossing.
or?
Yeah, they're pretty cross-platform. They like Nintendo stuff quite a bit. Like, they're just very good podcasters, and they just make a very good, tight show that is a lot of fun to listen to. And yeah, I think it has some similar vibes to our show, which I think is pretty cool. So cool. Into the Ether, I like a lot.
Most of the gaming ones I listen to are pretty big and mainstream. Some of the lesser known gaming ones I listen to are probably something like Tidal Hack with Chris Scullion, who's a guy we followed since the official Nintendo magazine days here in the UK from a long time ago. He keeps up his website and his podcasts and YouTube and stuff, and he's just a really fun guy to follow. He's very knowledgeable about certain aspects of the industry, which I think so, and he's just got this hilarious Glaswegian wit, which I adore. So I'd recommend that one. Let's see. This next question.
Well, any other podcast recommendations?
Outside of gaming, I recommended the new politics one to you, MBZ.
You did, yeah.
I'm a big fan. It's my favorite American politics podcast, and that's Deconstructed with Mehdi Hassan.
American podcast, but is hosted by a Brit, so not really American podcast.
Yeah, I followed him very closely when he was in the UK. He wrote for the New Statesman, and then he moved to DC, and I think he was with Al Jazeera in DC, and now he's with The Intercept, which is like Glenn Greenwald's media empire, I guess, although I'm sure he'd hate that word. And he does like this very short half-hour interview-focused show every week about politics, and he's very much a big leftist, very big, even in like British standards. He's very much on the left, very far left of politics, and in an American context is just so rigorous and knowledgeable and thorough and relentless, and I love it. I love that about him. Like, he just doesn't back down.
Yeah, I think the thing that I've really liked is he just has no time for bullshit at all, and he will just tell it as it is, straight up. Yeah,
he's so straight to the point, and that definitely makes it a tough ride for a lot of his interview guests. But I'd highly recommend that one.
Yeah, that's a good one. So obviously I've gotten into reading a lot of books and stuff. My current favorite podcast that discusses that stuff is The Legendarium. They are very, very good, because I think, like, here's a podcast about Harry Potter, here's a podcast about Lord of the Rings, here's a podcast about all these different things, and that tends to be that if you do a book podcast, you like kind of find a niche of like one author or one series, and I know that that's easy to sell for like a fan base, but I always like the idea of like, hey, here's a podcast that talks about all these different types of books, and Legendarium is very good because they've covered a lot of the fantasy stuff I've been reading. They've also been doing a lot of sci-fi stuff recently, like The Expanse and stuff like that. So they are fantastic. I really, really like that show. And then another one that I've been listening to that's also writing adjacent is Writing Excuses, which is a podcast from Brandon Sanderson, who's my favorite author, and it's like a 15-minute show once a week with like a rotating kind of hosts of different writers, and they just have tips on different things about writing. And it's very interesting. Even though, like, I would like to write a book one day probably, but it's one of those things that's
you heard it here first.
Interesting for me to hear and listen to. We'll see.
How has podcasting changed your gaming tastes?
I didn't know it's changed my taste that much, really. I think I was definitely on the bent of expanding my horizons before we started doing the show, you know? Like, you
think the podcast has reinforced that, perhaps, or it was going to happen anyway?
I think it was going to happen anyway for me personally, just because, you know, I think one of those things with games, you look at someone like Jeff Gerstmann, who's played literally fucking everything on Earth, and it takes a lot to surprise him these days. And I felt like if I was to kind of stick to everything I knew, then I wouldn't be surprised anymore, and I wouldn't get as much joy because nothing would be interesting. So that's why I kind of went out of my way to be like, I think it was 2014 where I played Rogue Legacy, Titanfall, and Hearthstone. Games and genres I would not give the fucking time of day beforehand, and I dearly love all three of those games. Well, Hearthstone less so, but like I got into Hearthstone for a while, right? And I wouldn't have gotten into Slay the Spire probably without knowing Hearthstone. So like it's definitely one of those things that has opened avenues for me and has allowed me to widen my taste more generally from that kind of jumping off point, I'd say.
Yeah, I think I was always keen to expand my horizons as well, but I do think that in some ways the podcast has reinforced that. Like, I am a completely different video game player right now than I was in November 2013 when we started, and I would argue potentially the podcast has sped that up a bit, maybe, but I mean, you never know the alternative reality, so I don't know how much I would have kind of gone outside my comfort zone, like buying a PS4, buying an Xbox One, like these, giving myself the ability to access a much wider array of video games and playing a ton of games outside my comfort zones as well. Like, I had an even more niche, potentially, comfort zone that I only owned like Nintendo systems for a very long time. So opening my eyes to those experiences and then getting excited to talk about those experiences on the show. Like, I think it is this very addictive loop that I really appreciate with the podcast, where I beat a game, I have a think about it, and I can talk about it. And that is like a very rewarding experience that I think does make me more keen on trying new things as much as I love like my comforts.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool.
You guys have never missed an episode. Has this ever come close to happening?
Probably. I think the thing is that we plan quite well, so we make sure that if it's in danger of not happening, we'll make it happen, right? Like when we went to America for 3 weeks or whatever it was, 2 weeks, and we had to do a show in America, we literally made it so that we would meet up in Washington and walk around Washington while podcasting, which is, you know, we went an extra mile for that, but like I think it was important to do that, right?
Yeah.
Or even like when you went off to Japan for the first time, and I think I got Nick on to do the show when that was happening, or we had one in between where you were unavailable. So like just planning beforehand, or like make sure we've pre-recorded an episode or something like that, is generally how it goes. And I think it's a lot. The thing that makes it easier for us is we're in the same time. We weren't for a while in the same time zone, but it wasn't that far apart. It was like 1 hour difference.
1 hour.
And there's only two of us, right? So it's not like scheduling a 4-person show where, well, you know, you can't have everyone at the same time every week always, which is much harder to do. So yes. I think it's just easier. And also, like, we've known each other for years, and it's very easy for us to like communicate and be like, okay, you busy now? No? Okay, cool. Like, it's fine.
Yeah,
you know?
Because our recording schedule is so fluid, when something comes up, it's almost not a block. It's just like, well, we normally have like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's normally when we record. And for a lot of podcasts, it'll be like, right, it has to be Saturday at this time or Sunday at this time. Whereas we're like, we've done morning, afternoon, evening, middle of the night.
Yeah, we've recorded segment 3 first, segment 1 first, segment 2 first, like out of order. It's just however it works.
It always changes based on news cycle, based on what we're playing. If we want to beat a game before we talk about it,
I think that's often why it's weird, right? Because we'll record the first segment last, because it's like you're playing Streets of Rage and like I want to finish it before talking about it on the show, right?
Right.
So stuff like that.
Yeah. So I think it's never come as close as you might think, considering we have been consistent since November 2013. But it does take like a portable audio recorder is very useful, because in that episode with Nick, I believe I sent you a segment that I recorded with Caroline that I then went into the show. So it was
I don't know if that was that same episode, but it was one of those. Yeah.
I think the second time we went to Japan, I did that.
Yes, you did.
Yeah. So like, there's ways around it. You just got to plan ahead, and of course, being fortnightly helps. Where we have just more.
Oh, absolutely. If we were weekly, we would have missed an episode. I guarantee you.
Yeah, 100%, totally. So just giving that flexibility. What was your favorite thing about doing a podcast?
I don't know, lots of things. I always come away really, like, when we've done a good segment, I come away being like, well, that was a great discussion. Like, it was very satisfying, and like we got into it. Like stuff like the Earthbound retrospective that we did was just very, very, like, I think it's a great episode, and we did a really good job just getting into it and talking about it. And especially, like, I think a lot of people have said this, but when we have both played something and can really drill into it, whether it is in a backlog club or whether it's a new thing that we've both been playing, and we can really just dive deep on it and just have great discussions. I really get satisfaction from that.
Yeah, I mentioned it before, but that feeling of beating a game, finishing a game, and then having an outlet to talk about it feels incredibly rewarding. And I agree, like, when a big Nintendo game comes out and there's a lot to say about it, it's nice that we've both played a substantial chunk of it or beaten it or whatever, and then we come on and can talk for like 45 minutes, an hour about that one game, and then you know that people listening will enjoy it because it's the latest Nintendo game, but equally, like, in 2-3 years time, it's still, that is MZ Bali's view on that game when it came out, sort of thing. Like, that's a very rewarding cycle that I think just generally being creative, having a creative project is just really rewarding from even like a mental health perspective, and having like this consistent thing that we come and do every 2 weeks. Like, it feels, if everything else in, like, obviously right now with COVID-19 and like it's not a great situation out there, like, I've luckily been pretty okay personally from its effects, but like having this show to just come and, you know what, like, COVID-19 isn't happening in this podcast. We can talk about
There's an alternate universe over here.
Exactly. And that's a really nice thing, that even when there have been like lows in the past, like, it is nice that you can come and sit down and do something creative and think about something else. Like, that is a really positive thing that I don't think is overtly obvious about doing something like a podcast.
Sure. And the other obvious thing is, like, hey, I get to talk to my best friend every week or like every 2 weeks. It's an excuse, right? Because I don't, like, we Skyped a lot, when you were at uni and things like that, but it wasn't like all the time, and it wasn't like on a schedule.
It wasn't on a schedule.
It's like a forced excuse to do it, which is always a good thing about podcasts, right?
Yeah, and we'll talk a ton of topics that come nowhere near the show. About what we've been watching, what we've been reading, what we've been seeing in the world around us.
It's like, I think people don't understand, but like, when we sit down, it doesn't just take half an hour to record a segment. It takes like 2.5 hours, because there's like an hour and a half of bullshitting before we even hit the record button, and it's like, it's very hard to like sit down. Okay, right, we need to focus. Like, we need to do the recording. It needs to actually happen. That
would actually link to probably one of my top tips if you were doing your own podcast, is whoever you're doing it with, whether they're a guest or not, or your co-host, is to like have a decent conversation before starting, because I think it just makes everything feel more fluid. Now, obviously, like, natural. For us, that's very easy because we've been friends for such a long time. But like,
right.
If you're saying starting with a podcast with someone you've just met, like, I would say, like, just having that more casual aspect can make it just so much better to listen to, I think, rather than overly formalizing it.
Totally, yeah. The other thing is interesting, as you were mentioning, of, hey, we have these conversations, you can go back and listen to them, right? And one of those fun things is, I can go back and listen to my first experience of Breath of the Wild again and remember stories that I don't think I would have necessarily remembered if I didn't have like an audio history of them on the internet.
Or MBZ might be like, I thought that game was bullshit, and I'll be like, I don't think that was the case at the time, and then I'll just go back and listen to
exactly.
your view at the time. But MBZ, you actually said this about
right.
the game. Do you want to take that comment back or something?
Yeah,
like
just bring some evidence to the table. Yeah, it's
right.
always fun as well. Like when I was playing Rhythm Thief earlier this year, you played that like 3 years ago, whatever. So I was like, I can't remember what.
Actually, but
yeah, I can't remember what Bally said about it. So I just went and listened to that portion of that episode, and it's just fun to have that time capsule of like, oh, this is what Bally thought back then. Interesting.
Right,
it's cool.
Right. What's your least favorite thing about podcasting?
When my brain dies and I can't think of the thing or the word or whatever, which happens less so, but here's one of those funny things about podcasting. When you think you are spending too long formulating a thought, it feels like it stretches for fucking years. It feels like you're grasping for this word and you're like, oh, what the thing and the thing, and like you're like, oh shit, the listener is like definitely thinking I'm an idiot right now, and the listener's like, why can't you think of that thing? You're being so slow on the podcast. It stretches out for eternity, and then you listen to it back and it's like, oh, that was only like 3 seconds, like barely any time at all. It's very funny how that works.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like I always worry that I sound very, very slow, and I'm not, and there's a lot of ums, there's a lot of ahs. I'm not doing this right. And then I listen to it back, and it's like, it's all right. Like I can hear some of those pauses, and yes, you've like edited pauses out that I make sometimes, like when they're too long.
Well, yeah, you do it less so often, but like look behind the curtain. When Bally first started podcasting, he does this thing where he starts a thought. Then there's complete silence of like this pause, and then he finishes the thought, and all I had to do was just chop out that silence, and it literally sounds like the most natural thing in the world.
It's like consciously not saying an or an but just having a bit of silence to let the brain process. It's almost like it's doing the same thing, but I guess it's easier to edit out the silence than an or an
Yeah, and it just flows like perfection. 90% of the times that has happened, you would have no idea that it's happened because it flows so seamlessly, and it's really funny.
I've noticed it when I've been editing the Patreon shows. It's just like, why did you pause there? Like, what's going on? My least favorite thing is that because of the consistency, there are times when, and these are very rare, don't get me wrong, very, very rare, where I'm just not in the mood to podcast. Like you're not always in the mood to talk about what you've been playing. Maybe it's been a busy week and I've not played much, and then I'm like, what am I going to play? What am I going to talk about? And that's not a benefit of having 2 weeks, but there's always the occasion, and it is rare, where I've not played much, or I don't know what to say about what I've played, or I don't know, we're struggling to think of a third segment, or I'm just not in the mood to podcast, or there's other life pressures that make squashing the podcast into like the allocated time we're recording just more pressure, and it can get quite stressful in a way, but that happens rarely, and you get used to it, and it's just about creating that space, creating the just the space to do it.
Yeah, I mean, some of the other stuff is just like technical issues. Like when we lost that Game of the Year podcast, it just killed me. I was just so bummed out by that.
Especially when, as you said, like we do have that feeling of, oh, that was a really good segment, or that worked really well. And then, just when I mean, I could maybe count on two hands the number of substantial technical issues we've had, honestly, and across 169 episodes, that's not bad, but like, sometimes it just comes at really annoying times, and you do have to make that decision. Do you redo like there was one episode I was at some convention, this was ages ago, and I was telling all these stories about the things I'd done at the convention, and then the file corrupted or didn't work or something happened, and I had to retell you the same stories, and you were like faking reactions. And it's like, this is horrendous. Like, there must be a better way than this. So that's always an annoying thing about podcasting.
Yeah, but thankfully it's generally great most of the time, so it's good.
How have you each improved as a podcaster?
I don't know. I guess like I had an inbuilt advantage because I had talked a bunch into a microphone on my own for years.
If you go back and listen to NBZ, I would argue you voices evolve over time, regardless of how they sound on the mic over time. But I'd argue that yours hasn't changed a whole ton in terms of your tone and your, because you ultimately do have, we both have like a podcast persona. Like we've said this before, like, I don't sound like this when I'm talking to MBZ just on Skype outside of podcast. Like we do both have like a stage presence. That's the wrong word. Like a, just a stage persona.
Yeah. Well, that's any internet person. Greg Miller talks about this a bunch, about how he's actually not super loud when he's at home, right? Like it's a turned up version of yourself. It's an enhanced version of yourself.
Totally.
Yeah, so I don't know how much I've changed really. Like I think probably other people could tell me better than I could say myself. It's one of those tricky things to, when it happens like so gradually over a period of time, you don't really notice it until you go back right to the beginning and you're like, oh, I can pick out these different things that have adapted in terms of the language I use or the cadence of my speech or all those little minor little details that you can get into.
Yeah, I think like having gone back and listened to some very early episodes, I think I sound very, very different. And that's just to do with getting used to podcasting, getting used to the sound of your own voice and talking and thinking about games and what you actually like about them, and articulating that isn't always as easy as you think it might be.
No.
And that's just sort of a skill that I've now been practicing a very long time, and I feel like I have gotten better at it. But it is still hard to kind of say things that you think about games sometimes.
Yeah, it's you'll always have brain farts. You'll just forget what to say, and it will just be a weird thing. But thankfully, that's why editing exists, so you can take out all the stupid stuff that we do, because we do lots of stupid things, and we forget how to talk sometimes, right? Like it's.
And then they appear at the end of the show.
And then they appear at the end of the show, and you listen to them, and you hear our idiocy, because it's funny a lot of the time, and it's good.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, when they talk about their least favorite things about podcasting, would say editing. I like editing. I don't know. Maybe it's just I'm weird, but I find it very satisfying to like shift little audio things about and make it flow perfectly and make it sound good. So I like editing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, Jackpot, thank you very much for those questions. I hope that was a good look behind the curtain at how we do this whole podcasting thing here. Because, it's a lot. It's a lot to think about. Our next email is from Toby, who's from the UK. Hi, MBZ and Bally. I'm really enjoying the podcasts and they're helping me stay sane through these lockdown times. I have more of a fun challenge than a question for you. If Nintendo phoned you up tomorrow and said, hi, MBZ and Bally, we have this development team who are sat doing nothing and need your help developing a new title with these limitations. It has to only have 18 months of development time, access to any Nintendo properties, young or old. It has to sell well, and it should fit in with the current lineup that we know about. What would you both make? Keep up the good work. Toby.
Very good. I like the restrictions because, especially the one giving us 18 months, stops it from being like, well, I want a giant MMO Fire Emblem with all these elements and a giant Pokemon that flies in and all this, you could go very stupid with it, and that would take years and years to make, right? Versus something that has to be a little bit more constrained, but also has to fit in with all these criteria. But let's go to you first. What have you got? What do you think?
Well, I wanted to kind of fill gaps. So we always talk about like what genres have Nintendo not gone into yet, and I think the two that often come up are like MMOs, as you mentioned, and then I guess a more recent genre you could argue is like royales, battle royales.
Okay, sure, yeah. As a spin-off of the shooter,
right? The fact that, and we have seen like Tetris 99, which is a form of battle royale, and then you think, what? It's a popular genre. It's often like free to play, and that's a huge. Could you argue it sells well if it's free to play? But I am keen to go down this battle.
I mean,
royale.
It has a large player base, right?
Right. I'm keen for that large player base, and I'm confident this idea could work. And that's to bring back a Nintendo property that hasn't had a new game since 2003 or something, like with F-Zero.
Okay.
So what I'm thinking of, and the name at the moment is just like F-Zero Royale, but essentially it's free to play. It's online, because there was this whole quote from like Miyamoto, like I think it was Miyamoto. It's like, why don't you bring F-Zero back? He said, oh, there's nothing new you can really do to that franchise. And it's like, yeah, maybe you're right, but surely you could just have a really good looking racing game and have online modes. But that's obviously a bit boring for Nintendo. So this game would be free to play, massive online game, 50 player races, and then because it's F-Zero Royale, last place is eliminated at the end of each lap, and you do a 50 lap race. This is then this is a huge like idea to promote Nintendo Online, because that's the payment you have to essentially do to play it. It's not like it's a fixed cost for the year, rather than like paying for the game individually, like an Apex Legends, like Fortnite, I guess. And the idea is that then they would make a lot of money through all the, bells and whistles like you do with Apex Legends.
Yeah. I mean, is there any other pitch other than are they in cars at all in this F-Zero Battle Royale? Like, what's the combat look like?
It's not it's not combat. It's a race, I should say.
All right. Do they drop from the sky though? Do they drop from the sky onto a giant racetrack?
50 people at the start of a grid. Because one thing about F-Zero GX I loved was there were like 30, 40 racers, and it was like a lot of cars. It looked incredible. So I'd want to bring back this idea of like 50 racers, and then it's a long race. This is like F1 levels of 50 lap races.
Okay.
And then at the end of each lap, the last place driver is eliminated.
Okay.
And then it could remain the same track for a while, and then similar to like Apex Legends,
it shrinks or whatever.
No, you don't have to shrink the track. It's just the last place is eliminated.
Or you maybe could, right? If you build in shortcuts and stuff like that, you make it so that if they drive through the easier parts of the track, then they take damage as they go through it, right? And they're forced to take the shortcuts or things like that, potentially.
Right. And I think that when you look at the success, and we're going to talk about it in the next segment, but with 55 million Switches out there, I think it is possible to look at the Switch as, how can we like get lots of people playing a game, obviously make it free to play. When you launch a free to play game on a system that's already got 55 million units out there, and I think they are up to like 10 to 15 million Nintendo Online subscriptions as well. Like, that's a lot of people to experience this game, and obviously you're going to get lots of Nintendo fans like me who are like, yeah, F-Zero's back, and I think it would create a bit of a storm online. And then my concern is that Nintendo haven't done like a driving game, and I guess they've got Mario Kart, it's kind of different, but they've not done like a driving game, a racing game in such a long time, that I hope that they could really put together a high quality experience, and I'm confident they could. Whether they could do it in 18 months, I don't know. That's maybe the one area that I'm very weak on in this idea, but that's
I would say that definitely Battle Royale as a genre is lower scope, potentially, depending on like the foundation you have. If you think about it, Fortnite copied PUBG in the space of 6 months, right? Like they turned that around, and then Apex, I think, has been a shorter development cycle for Respawn. Obviously, it's like an ongoing development thing because it's a games as a service. But yeah, that's a fun idea. I also think F-Zero is good for that, because not only can you eliminate people who are lost, but you can also just ram into people and knock them off and destroy their racer, right? Like the part of Super Nintendo F-Zero, why it's so fucking hard, is because you have to keep your life bar full and not get destroyed as well along the way. So it's the case of like maintaining your structure and things like that. I know it would be interesting to have, I don't know, loot on the racing grid, as it were, or like places where you could go and get armor that increases your resistance and things like that to make you survive longer. And I don't know if you'd want to go a little Mario Kart with it and start adding a bit of car combat in terms of, shooting at other races. Or
I mean, GX, you do have like the ability to do a spin attack essentially and like bosh people off the track, and it did affect your speed, so it's like a push your luck kind of mechanic. So you could include something like that. And I mean, the biggest balance with GX is that your boost meter actually affects your health. When you're boosting, you're sucking away your health, so it's a much more push your luck scenario. And I think the great mechanic with this game would be, and this always happens with F-Zero GX, is you do loads of boosting before the finish line because you're going to cross the finish line and you don't need health to continue after the finish line, obviously. But if you're like in last place, you're just going to be boosting like hell just to try and overtake someone, and then someone else gets eliminated. Like, I think it's a great idea that I'm surprised the racing format hasn't had a royal game yet.
I'm pretty sure Forza did a limited time battle royale mode. I think Forza.
Oh, I think you're right. Actually, no, that does sound right. But
was it Horizon 4 that they added that to? I feel like that happened last year at some point.
Yes, I think. Yeah, it's obviously like a paid for online. Well, I say paid for, like, I've not got online on my Xbox, but I think they called it the Eliminator. So something like that, but for F-Zero, I think could be awesome, and then stick it as free to play. Nintendo Switch. Make people happy.
That's nice. I like that. That's got some fun idea. Like, I think it maps pretty well to the genre. I don't know why, but every time I do one of these things, I always choose Splatoon as a basis, because for me, Splatoon it's such a malleable franchise for Nintendo. I just find it so.
It's one of the most innovative things they've invented in like the last 20 years, honestly, and and one of the most successful on top of that. Like, it's
and because of its popularity, like, I think it is so ripe to just do different things with it. But I think the interesting thing they could do is just do one of the most traditional Nintendo things possible, which is just make a 2D platformer with Splatoon. You look at their current lineup, and the only 2D platformers they have are like an old Mario game from a previous system and a Mario Maker game, right? Which isn't quite the same as a Nintendo handcrafted...
And like remakes of Tropical Freeze and stuff. But yeah.
Exactly, right? But the other Nintendo platformers is either a bad Kirby game or like a remake of an amazing Donkey Kong one.
And Yoshi.
And Yoshi, right?
Lots Yoshi.
There's a lot of uninspiring platforming going on from Nintendo in this generation currently, I would argue. Especially because, like, I think, even though I went back to Mario Maker 2 recently, it's still not that surprising or fun as it was originally. So I think there is space for Nintendo to go in there with another one of their franchises and make another platformer that would blow the doors off people. I think Splatoon is a great one for that, because you have these mechanics that you can map in a really interesting way in terms of diving into the ink, maybe like using that as building up speed and momentum to like jump gaps and things like that. You can obviously use the gun as a weapon. You could even make it maybe potentially Contra style to some degree. But I think the most interesting thing about it would be, like, Nintendo needs to get away from this 2.5D style. I do love Tropical Freeze, it looks great, but you look at stuff like Ori and Rayman Legends, and, like, to me, that's the direction I want to see 2D platformers go, which is the hand-drawn painterly art style. And there is a way in which you could do an almost maybe graffiti-esque style that would map really nicely to the tone and the kind of vibe of Splatoon, that would also come into that painterly aesthetic, and just like fucking put money into this thing, right? Like, Ori and the Will of the Wisps is one of the most AAA 2D games I've ever seen, and Nintendo has the money to just throw so much cash at a 2D game to make it look amazing, to make it look like this huge budget 2D game. Which I don't think there's enough of that happening in the industry, mainly because it's hard, right? Like, it's difficult to make a game that looks that good consistently, and it's just easier to do a 2.5D video game. And
if you kind of look at like how Inkling controls in a 2D space in a game like Smash Brothers, like, it is a really cool character who feels very floaty and has like that crazy boost jump. I'm not saying these would be the exact moves of this game, obviously, but like, there's so much you can do with that world, but also just the character with the gun, and how changing from a squid to a kid and back again can affect like 2D platforming in a 2D space. Like, I think there's so much you can do. The like boost that you see in Smash Brothers almost like reminds me of the Celeste boost or something, you know, like it's that
right.
And as you say, like, art style I think does itself. I think there's some awesome 2D art style, as you said, spray paint kind of style funkiness they could do with that game, that it's a world that is crying out for something more than purely the third person multiplayer experience that it is. I guess it does have that single player mode, but obviously we're talking about a different game.
Yeah, no, Splatoon is the franchise they need to do spin-offs for, and like, it is in Japan, it's like their most popular franchise currently. Obviously probably Animal Crossing has done a number on that at this point, but Splatoon's huge still, and worldwide it's past 10 million units sold, right? It's in the 10 million club for Nintendo, and there's not many individual games that are able to pull that off. Are they? No, I don't think they're past 10 million. I think I saw a stat of like the Nintendo games that have, what individual games that have maybe sold 10 million.
I think Splatoon 2 just passed 10 million.
Maybe it did.
I think
Maybe
Stealth
it did.
talked about it on Twitter.
Yeah, I think it was like 7 something or 8, so I imagine it probably is past 10 at this point, which is deserved because it's fantastic. It's really, really good. But I just it's weird because like it's supposed to fit in with their current lineup, and yeah, they have a good amount of platforms. But like, I would argue that none of those are like, hey, stop the presses. This is a platformer you need to pay attention to. I think
the last
other
one was Tropical Freeze, maybe, unless you count Mario
probably
Maker, right?
Yeah, totally. Definitely, I would say that would be the last time that Nintendo, even when that game came out, it was kind of derided because it wasn't Metroid Prime. Like Retro were working on a platformer. You know, people don't like spending money on things like that.
And as you said, like as good as that game looked like with the 2.5D, as good as it looked at the time, and it still looks really good. I agree that the styles of Rayman and Ori are kind of like a next level in a way, and they kind of seem like the ideal future direction for what Nintendo could do with a 2D platformer.
Yeah, like I love Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. It's fantastic. It feels so good to play. But I would prefer if that game had a 2D aesthetic that wasn't this kind of polygons on the screen. It was more painterly. It was much more pleasing to the eye. It looks good still, but like I don't like that trend generally.
When will the next 2D platformer from Nintendo come? Because it feels weird it has been so long. And which series will it be from, or will it be Splatoon?
The Galaxy Brain bet would be a new 2D Mario with a cool art style. That's never going to happen because Nintendo hates us, obviously. The wise man's choice is another fucking Kirby game. Yep.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's an obvious answer, honestly. It's Kirby or Yoshi. Like, it's just probably Kirby because we've just had Yoshi. Well, we had Kirby on Switch as well.
Can we please get a Wario Land? Like, talking about fucking gorgeous 2D art styles.
Right.
Wario Land, shake it, dear Lord. Give me a sequel to that game, please, Nintendo, please. I'm begging you. Oh, come on. It's been too long. I need Wario in my life.
Or bring DK back with a new art style. Just something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good question, Toby. I hope those ideas have become a reality because I think they were both really good. But again, please send emails to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. We put out the call. We're always looking for more, and it would be hugely appreciated. But that's all we've got time for emails this week. Join us in the third segment where we're going to be talking a bit about the news and some Nintendo financial statistics that we want to talk about because it's pretty interesting. So don't go anywhere. Join us after the break.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the third and final part of today's show. And, you know, there's not been a lot of news happening, but Nintendo have posted some big numbers out on the internet there for their shareholders and for the world to see. Their financials came through for the year from 2019 through 2020. And hey, people like Animal Crossing, surprise, surprise. There's a lot of stuff coming through here in terms of how many units they've sold of Switch. So probably start with that in terms of we're past the 55 million mark, which to me is not like huge because they'd already passed 50 million last year. Like the last quarter was their big one because obviously holidays and things had happened, and they sold a lot of copies of Pokemon and of the Switch Lite. Luigi's Mansion definitely had a part to play there. Like all their end of last year, I think you'll agree with me, was pretty strong. So it kind of set them up to do quite well. So I think they've done, is it another 3 million in the last quarter, Bally?
I'm trying to read the financials. I know that like the regular Switch is up to 49.6 million.
Right. Versus the Switch Lite has added a bunch more.
Switch Lite is sitting on 6.19. I believe for the year it was sitting on like 18, 19 million for the fiscal year. Fiscal year actually. And then so the Switch Lite makes up almost a third of those
Switches
sales.
Sold throughout that period.
Exactly.
Because it's good. So you'll remember that Kimishima posted a number back, I think in 2018, that in 2018 they wanted to hit 20 million units sold, and people were like, you're never going to do that. And they didn't in 2018, but they have done in 2019. They did post over 20 million sales, which is pretty significant, and it's going at a good rate. And I think you need to keep in mind, right, the Switch hasn't had a price drop yet, but the Switch Lite has entered the market as a way for them to kind of sidestep a price drop, right? Like it's afforded them the opportunity to be like, look, we know kids are going to want to play Pokemon, and parents are out there not wanting to drop $300 on a console. $200 is a much more like feasible asking price for a parent at Christmas to get their kid something. So it looks like that attitude, that kind of plan of pair Pokemon with a much cheaper entry price has worked. And also, it's started to pan out even more because now Animal Crossing has become this thing that is so wide-reaching that people who don't play video games are playing Animal Crossing, so having a Switch Lite as an option is even more nice for people, right? Because, it's cheaper and it lets people get in on them a lot easier. Not that it's easy to buy Switches right now, because apparently, with the supply chains and everything, it's almost impossible to buy new Switches. But, hey, that's how
I've got the exact numbers here. So it's total Switches in the financial year 2020. So that's, 2019 into March 2020 is 21.03 million units. Of those, 14.83 million were the original Nintendo Switch and 6.19 million were the Switch Lite.
So a pretty significant chunk.
Right.
Yeah. And then there's Animal Crossing, which has just done bananas numbers, right? I think it was 11 million in 11 days. Like a million a day.
So the big number, the 11.77 million units, is crazy, and that's only going to go higher. But the bigger story is just how it's reached that number in such a short space of time. Because if you look over the last financial year, the big three are Pokemon Sword and Shield on 17.37 million units in that year. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe still absolutely pumping out the units with 8.08 million in the last year.
It's Nintendo's GTA 5 Mario Kart 8
Right,
Deluxe,
exactly. And then Animal Crossing sitting on 11.77 million units in a matter of weeks.
Right, which Animal Crossing has actually sold total 13.41 million since everything in the last 6 weeks or however long.
So it's already outsold
the lifetime sales.
The lifetime sales of New Leaf and Wild World. And I would argue in time it will probably outsell them in life sales combined, to be honest.
Well, yeah, maybe. Well, it depends,
trajectory.
right? Like, you got to think about what is the current install base. Wild World and New Leaf in particular, New Leaf came at a point where 3DS hadn't quite established a hold on the market. It was only 2 years into the 3DS's lifespan, and 3DS wasn't a super success by that point in time. 2013 was the year where it became a success, arguably, with the release of Fire Emblem Awakening and Luigi's Mansion 2, Animal Crossing, Pokemon X and Y. Like, that was one of the biggest years in 3DS history. And so you could argue, right, that because New Leaf only sold a few million when it first started out, that it eventually juggernauted its way through. I would say in terms of install base and stuff like that, the Switch is at a much faster pace than the 3DS was at that similar point of time in its life cycle when Animal Crossing came out. So
absolutely.
Does that mean that people who are going to buy Animal Crossing have all just bought it already? Or does it mean that there is an even longer tail on this game in particular? Or does it just mean that because of the lockdown and the coronavirus that we're in a unique situation where Animal Crossing is selling because it's a cultural zeitgeist above all else?
Right. I think it's all of them, right? I think it would have sold anyway, regardless of COVID-19. I think it has sold much better because of COVID-19, and I think it's going to sell really well because it's actually a really well-made game that is the best in the series so far. Like, I think it's got all these things going for it. It's also the advantage of things like social media, which have even evolved substantially since 2013 with New Leaf, right? So like there's a lot more people on social media, on Instagram, sharing images, sharing videos, and that can only help spread the word of this game.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I feel like gets under talked about, is how Nintendo's games have just stuck like glue to social media. And I don't think that Nintendo intentionally does this stuff. I think Nintendo of America, the localization team, definitely thinks about it. I don't think that NCL does. I don't think that the development studios think about the shareability of lines in Animal Crossing or things like that. I think the
share button on Switch, while important, will have definitely been not necessarily an afterthought, but like it's not a key component of the Switch, when in reality it might be the thing that potentially sells the most Switches through the ability it has to spread the word of Nintendo,
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's kind of this beautiful accident that they've kind of managed to make it work and make things happen with them with that stuff. So yeah, that's definitely been a big boon for them. But you just see now that their revenue has been far less diversified, which you could say is like good in some senses, but also it's good for the Switch. It's maybe bad for their portfolio in terms of thinking, are Nintendo putting all their eggs in one basket, right? So you have this graph here, Bally, that you were chatting to me about,
right?
About how like it's a pie chart where it shows Switch's share of Nintendo's revenue is 94%.
Right. So in the last year, 94% of all the money that Nintendo have made has come from the sales of hardware and software and accessories of the Nintendo Switch. So the other little parts in that pie chart, I should say, are 3DS, which is hardware, software, and accessories, is 1%. Another 1% is other, so that's Amiibo, Virtual Console, remember that, other platforms, and then smart devices, so mobile and IP is 4%. So considering that they have done a lot of stuff to do with mobile, maybe 4% doesn't seem like much, but it might actually be more than you initially might think, based on the fact that we know that the Switch has sold so well and that chunk is obviously going to be absolutely huge. But I did make the point in a tweet that this might be the most eggs in one basket Nintendo have been in my lifetime. I'm trying to think back. I guess before the Game Boy launched, they were maybe quite focused on the NES and then the Super Nintendo, but maybe outside of that period, it's definitely the most eggs in one basket, you might say.
Well, the thing is, you could argue that they've always been eggs in one basket for a long time because, we've got the blip of the Wii and the DS era, but like arguably the GameCube was negligible, right? Like the GBA was what was carrying them through that time, and the Wii U was negligible. The 3DS was carrying them through that time. So like often it seems like Nintendo do have more diversified, but they still are kind of all eggs in one basket.
Yeah, you say negligible, but I bet it would make up a much bigger chunk than I'd say it'd be up at like 5, 10, 15, 20% of their income rather than one.
Right, exactly. No, yeah, exactly. It's much more drastic in this case, but for sure, that's true. And then the other thing that I thought was quite interesting was the percentage of revenue by region, where Europe, the whole of Europe, accounts for 25%, whereas just Japan accounts for 23%. Almost the same. One country versus a whole bunch of countries, which just speaks to how important a market Japan is still for Nintendo.
When you think that the European market in terms of population is close to 3 times the size of, more than 3 times the size of Japan, the idea that almost a quarter of all revenue is made from just Japan is huge. And I think honestly, like the Americas is kind of crazy big as well, with 43%, and then 9% is other. So like, those are the 3 big markets, America obviously being the biggest for Nintendo. And I'm interested in what thin slither would be the UK in that European
Oh boy,
chunk, but it's probably
not a lot, like 2-3%. Probably. Like, I know that they're strong markets, like Germany is a strong market for them.
France.
I don't know, Italy maybe, France, yeah. But generally European countries. The thing is, Sony got here first, and so, well, not first, but like Sony got here and like planted a flag, and especially in, you know, a lot of these countries, it's just that they have taken over, and that's part of why they're kind of dominant across the world, is because Europe is a big chunk of their market. So yeah, maybe let's move on from pure numbers and talk about some of this other stuff in terms of. So what from your perspective, Bally, how do you feel about Nintendo's future with what we are currently experiencing? It's an interesting article that I read recently. Well, I didn't read the article. There was a Reset Era thread about it that broke down like this article that was talking about, are Nintendo recession proof, in the sense that we are currently in an era where we are definitely going to have a massive fucking recession. And Nintendo, first of all, thrived in an era in the US in the late 80s where there was economic downturn and they became like the best-selling toy. Then during the 2008 like housing crisis, they soared through with the Wii. And now we're in an era where everyone is playing video games and the Switch is the hottest thing on earth. And maybe that's just coincidence. Maybe it's just Nintendo's business model. Maybe it's video games. But it seems like Nintendo are one of those companies that kind of can weather any storm.
I think they've got a lot of key pillars that I would argue make them more recession proof than a lot of other companies. And I think the two things that play together in that I think do really well for them based on these figures actually is there's, of their last financial year, they were as a proportion of all their sales, 34% were digital. So that is still like that's up on the previous year, I should say. So that is still like a really big chunk of money coming in that's purely digital rather than physical. So even
and that's no like losses there, right? That's pure money to them. There's no retailers to go through or anything.
Well, that's exactly
100% theirs.
And on top of the fact that their biggest sellers are games that have been out for a while, like we were talking about Mario Kart Deluxe, Pokemon, now Animal Crossing, like these are very evergreen titles that are just going to keep selling. So combined with the digital platform, if there are issues to do with distribution and making copies in relation to COVID-19, they are prepared. But on top of that, they have accounted for COVID-19 in their future projections. And I think this is regardless of, the games coming out. This is a combination of what they know is coming out, and these stats suggest that sales will be down 8.3% and profit down 14.9% for the next fiscal year. But if you're talking about like a global recession for a company this size and scale and scope of Nintendo, I don't know a ton about economics, but for your profit to only drop by 14.9% seems like you've done a damn good job, to be honest, because I think they just have a lot of. We talk about how they are eggs in one basket with the Switch, but that is skating over the fact that they do have a really great digital lineup that people can access regardless of like manufacturing hard copies. And I just think that yes, if they only have a 14.9% dip, and I think it will probably be much more, although we don't know the full scope of COVID-19 at this stage, I think they'll be happy with that, and they will be even happier that they are not launching a console this year.
Yeah, for sure. Like, that's going to be stressful for the folks over at Microsoft and Sony, just trying to figure out, are they even going to be able to get things out, right? Because it seems like because China was ahead of the curve on this stuff, their factories and stuff seem to be going back into function a bit more, so that they will be ready in time for when all that production needs to go on. But it's hit or miss, right? We just don't know what's going to happen with that stuff. But it is interesting because, like, their lineup is quite thin, and like that can have an impact. But you look at the top charts every week, and it is like Mario Kart's always going to be there. Pokemon probably still pops back in.
Exactly.
Animal Crossing is going to be a mainstay. So, to what degree does it really change anything about that?
Well, that's the thing, is that 2 of these 6 games, we can talk through these 6 things on the slide that they talked about that are coming in this upcoming fiscal year. 2 of them, like the Animal Crossing DLC, Is that going to be paid for? We don't know. I think they're going to do a ton of free updates.
Well, that's like, I think they're talking about it as continuous updates because it is like the events like Bunny Day and May Day and all that stuff.
I'd be skeptical that they will do paid DLC for Animal Crossing. That's not
at least
to say
for
it
a
won't
while,
happen. At
right?
least for
like,
a while.
You know.
But then, like I was just saying about digital, like the thing about DLC with Pokemon Sword and Shield, this expansion pass is it's obviously 100% digital. It's 100% not to do with supply chains and manufacturing copies. So that is something that will play into this situation that we're currently in with COVID-19.
Yeah. The only thing I would say is that So Nintendo have been on the verge of expanding their revenue streams in terms of they're doing the Mario movie with Illumination and they're doing that theme park thing with Universal.
Yes.
So those are two
going to launch
things
this summer in Osaka. So that is a bit of a blip.
Yeah, it's a huge bummer. So both of those things are areas that they would like to, increase their profit margins, but they're not going to be able to because those are two things that are going to be vastly affected by what's going on right now, which means even more so, the eggs are still in this one basket of Switch, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And just in line with my point as well, we got the Fighters Pass obviously coming, but we know that there's going to be delay to that, but it does play into
because Sakurai has said that the Smash team are like, it's not really easy for them to work on that stuff, just the way that their structure is bound.
So we've mentioned the 3 DLC kind of related game add-on pass things. Do you want to talk about the other 3 games they've got lined up?
Yeah, so like one of them is only Japan relative because it's like Famicom Detective Club that they're making a new one of those in 2020. A franchise that I've known about for a bunch of years because there were trophies for it in Smash Melee, and I never knew what they were. And apparently it's an interesting like Japan exclusive Nintendo series. I'd like to play that at some point, but it's never been released here.
I think that pie chart really justifies this idea when they do Japan exclusives and people go, why would they only sell to Japan? It's because it's a quarter of their entire market.
Yeah, exactly.
They're still going to make a big ton of money out of that, even if it is exclusive. So I thought that's interesting.
It's better for them to like localize as much as they can, but if this is a series that is so Japan centric that it's so hard to localize, then fair enough. And then we obviously have the Clubhouse Games game, which I guess I didn't realize that was a Nintendo published / developed game. But yeah, sure. And obviously Xenoblade, which is a remake, remaster, I should say, definitive edition. And look, here's my call out, okay? I know there's people out there who don't play JRPGs.
Here we go.
Right? Like, there are people out there who don't want to go through the anime nonsense. They don't like JRPG. They don't like long games. They're not into it. It's not their thing. Let me just give you a pitch for Xenoblade Chronicles. Xenoblade Chronicles is one of the best games ever made by humankind. It is a great story. It has lovable characters. It does some anime stuff, but honestly, like, it's pretty grounded in terms of... I think part of this is the European voice cast that lend it a bit more of a kind of, not medieval fantasy vibe, but, like... It feels more unique because of that factor, because so many of these games are always American. Like, look at Final Fantasy VII Remake, all American voice cast, and it doesn't have that kind of flavor to it like Xenoblade does. It is one of the most expansive and beautiful worlds I've ever explored in a video game. It just has a great plot, a really fun battle system. It is just beautiful and amazing. And if you only have a Switch right now, I know you're playing Animal Crossing, that's great. Xenoblade Chronicles is at least 100 hours of your time, and Nintendo are not putting anything else out for the foreseeable future. So I encourage you to play Xenoblade Chronicles when it comes out on May 29th, because it's delightful, and I'm sure you'll have a good time. That's my soapbox. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. That's all I'm going to say.
Not only are we discussing Nintendo financials, but MBZ is helping Nintendo with their financials all in one segment.
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm a shill, man. Look, Nintendo, pay us to just do a promotion of Xenoblade. I'll take your money. Yeah. So like that's the game, and people can argue it's a remaster, whatever. The fact is, most people haven't played it, so to most of you, it's new. And then we don't know what's happening, right? Like, there's no way Breath of the Wild 2 is coming out this year. There's no way Metro Prime 4 is coming out this year. Bayonetta is one of those games that they wouldn't put on a slide like this because it is a third-party partnership. And we also don't know what's happening with that development. And then you also have stuff like No More Heroes 3, which is the same situation. It's a third-party partnership. So there is other stuff, potentially big names coming to Switch this year. But with everything, it's a case of we have no idea. So...
Yeah.
So yeah, it's weird. Weird times to live in, Bally. But
It's very weird. Maybe that Levi's partnership will save them.
yeah, maybe. Or the Lego stuff.
Or the Lego.
The Lego, that's such a weird announcement that happened that we never really talked about. But like that, I don't like the look of that Mario, you know? Like it's just a weird...
It's just not Lego.
It's not Lego. It's like this weird Duplo interactive. It's kind of its own thing. And I don't really understand it. Like it's one of...
Again, it's one of those things like I'd be interested in like an 8-year-old's reaction to it, and I appreciate that as a grown man it doesn't appeal to me, but I'm not the point, I guess. So if kids love it and it sells well, then I guess it will be a good move by them, but I don't know.
Also, calling us grown men I think is a little bit of an overstatement. Let's be honest here.
Grown men with kids' hearts.
Yes, exactly.
As Disney say, the young and the young of heart. That's the phrase they use a lot when they're marketing.
Exactly. Definitely true. 100%.
Interesting little point. Their mobile sales, as low as they are in proportion of their overall income, are up 11.5% on the previous year. So games like Mario Kart Tour...
Yeah. I guess people have played Mario Kart Tour, and it seems like the general mobile market who doesn't complain about like microtransactions and stuff seems to have had a decent time with Mario Kart Tour, I guess.
Yeah.
You know?
The sad tale of Nintendo on mobile.
Oh, it's so depressing. It's one of the most depressing things about Nintendo's history, is the fact that they just kowtowed to the mobile market and realized that, yeah, if you just make a gacha game, you'll make more money than if you make a quality product that you sell for £10 on the shop. Yep, that's how it goes.
I'd like to give a shout out to a game that was the 4th best-selling game on the Switch in the last fiscal year.
Okay.
Which I don't think they would have predicted would have been that high, but I'm very pleased it was that high. It's Luigi's Mansion 3.
Hell yeah.
I'm so happy that game sold so well. Like, I think it's a great game. I love when quality first... single player games do well. I just think that's awesome.
The other thing to mention is that Breath of the Wild has passed Mario Odyssey again.
They keep leapfrogging each other.
Yeah, well, not leapfrogging each other. What happened was Breath of the Wild sold super well. Mario Odyssey came out and outsold it pretty much instantly, which was kind of frightening. But I think it speaks to how Breath of the Wild is a game that has a longer like cultural impact. Because it is so game changing and so fantastic, even though Mario Odyssey is amazing, like Mario Odyssey is like a perfect Mario game. It's just not like a gargantuan industry shifting thing. Mario Odyssey will still sell well, but Breath of the Wild I think is starting to overtake it because it is starting to achieve that like status of it's bigger than like anything the Zelda series has done before. And so I think Breath of the Wild, I kind of predicted this, that Breath of the Wild over time would end up being the better selling game out of the two, and it seems like that is starting to bear out.
Breath of the Wild sold better than Link's Awakening in the year that Link's Awakening came out.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Which is only just, but it's still, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, well, it's also
1,
like
2, 3, 4, 5,
it's
6.
I don't like to talk about games in terms of how much content there is in it and stuff like that, because I think it's like a depressing conversation about like taking this piece of art and taking it down to how many hours can you get out of it. But like it's a real consideration for humans who spend money on things, and Breath of the Wild is like 200 hours and Link's Awakening is like 10, so they're the same price. They're both $60 video games. It's the way Nintendo has positioned themselves, is that now, even though they do a 2D Zelda, they still have to charge the same amount for it. And it's a remake. It's a remake of a Game Boy game, and it's the same price as Breath of the Wild. And, like, I'm sorry, but, like, Breath of the Wild is a better value proposition for most consumers than Link's Awakening is.
Totally.
It's just how it is, so...
Are we in for a rough year then? And I say rough, it's obviously expected because of COVID-19, but it's... The more that's coming out, it seems like Nintendo were going to potentially have a quieter year in any case, and this might have just not made it even more quiet.
I mean, the rumors are they're not even doing an E3 thing until after June.
Right.
Like, that's been delayed, so that would suggest that even the games that would be announced there would be even further delayed.
So, assuming the biggest game of the year is potentially the rumored 3D Mario collection remake series, do we get that this year? And is it announced in sort of July, August time?
Yeah, I think that's the one that's the most feasible. Like, you look at what they're putting out. They're putting out a remake of Xenoblade remaster, so that would suggest that, like, sure, probably the Mario stuff has had much more work done to it, but I feel like that's the type of thing that you have been working on for a little while now in preparation for the 35th anniversary, and you just put out there because it is easy enough to put out, and because it's Mario and it'll sell well regardless, so, you know, it's probably a good shoe-in. But, like, the biggest title of the year has already been released. Like, Animal Crossing came out. That was Nintendo's big title for the year. And they dropped it early, so that's just kind of how it's gone so far.
Yeah. I wouldn't put it past Nintendo that it's going to be the biggest selling title of next year as well.
Yeah.
Because it's obviously going to be out for the entire year versus potentially other games coming down the line.
Yeah, potentially.
And then you got the old Bayonetta 3, Pikmin 4. Any of these dropping this year?
No, not at all. I think to set people's expectations properly, we should expect nothing and be happy if we get anything, right?
Yeah, that's where I am, honestly. Like, we're going to get nothing, and if that Mario collection does come out this year, then that's cool. Like,
and so, like, my proposition to people is like, hey, you probably have a backlog the size of your fucking, like, house, so just play old games, right? Like, it's one of those things. There's people sending questions to podcasts and like, well, if we had this weird theoretical situation where no video games were coming out, what would be the games you tackle first on your backlog? Like, what would you get through? And somehow that has become a reality. So look at your backlog, see what big games you have, and start eating into them, because now is the time, man. Now is the time to do it. So yeah, that's it, I think. That'll probably do us. Any other points, any things, any little tidbits of information you wanted to pick out, Bally? Or
you're going to get a Levi's shirt with Mario on it?
No, probably not.
Okay.
Well, here's the thing. I buy clothes only if they have things I care about. Like, I'll buy a t-shirt if it has a Game of Thrones thing on it or something like that, right? So maybe, but like, I prefer the subtle stuff. I prefer the, like, you know, name of a thing in a video game that people wouldn't necessarily know in a cool style of, like, a diner thing or something. I don't know, stuff like that. But well, there you have it. That's Nintendo's financials. That is where we think Nintendo are at for the rest of the year. And yeah, we'll keep doing a show, because even during the Wii U, when nothing was coming out, we did a show and we kept it going. So that's how things are going to happen.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, let's plug ourselves, do things, and get on out of here then, Bally. Obviously, we're supported by some lovely folks over on patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife is where you can go if you want some bonus podcasts, some fun things. You can check us out over there, and we'd like to thank some of our patrons.
Yes, thank you to all of our $10 tier patrons. They are Atari Alex, Thomas, Jackpot, and my fiancée Caroline. Thank you very much for your support, but thank you to all of our other patrons. We had a bit of a boost, like we mentioned last time, and it's really, really appreciated, especially during these times. So yeah, as MBZ mentioned, we got 2 exclusive shows over there on Patreon. Make sure to check those out. That's TNL Ranks and TNL Takes. We got a TNL Takes coming up next week, so you'll want to check that one out.
That's going to be a fun one. I'm excited for that one. And yeah, you can find us all over the internet. We're on Twitter, of course. The podcast is at TNL Podcast. We also have a YouTube channel where we put up video version of it, which is youtube.com/ThisNintendoLife. I'm trying to actually get the timestamps on the podcast version now as well beforehand.
It's a new little thing MBZ decided to do. We're going to do timestamps like straight away. Normally there'd be a little delay and they'd come to the YouTube version, but yeah, straight away in the description, timestamps.
Yep, and you can find me on Twitter at LordNBZ, where I tweet things. I don't know. What does anyone tweet about these days?
You retweet videos of a man removing the tops of 5 Corona beer bottles in a row with a sword while holding it in his crotch. That's the quality content I like to see.
That's quality content, reblogging other things. Yeah.
Because what else is Twitter for?
Well, it's a Twitter for, that's true. Bally, where can they find you retweeting that from me on your feed?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. And yes, I like to retweet and tweet equally bizarre videos and images and all sorts of fun things.
If you ever come across a video of someone falling over on the internet, just send it to Bally.
I love it. I love
He'll
it.
enjoy that.
There's nothing
It's his
better.
favourite thing.
Especially
It's his
kids
favourite.
falling over. When they're like just the slapstick of kids and pets falling, knocking each other over. It's just.
Bally, I don't know if I've ever
quality.
shown you, but so when we were in Portugal back in the day with my younger cousin, she was like 3 at the time, I think. I was running around the pool table, and my sister was taking a video for whatever reason, and it is like the most You've Been Framed comedy thing of all time, because she runs into the corner of the table and like just falls over, and the most comical, like her hat falls off. It is fucking hilarious, and it's like on a really old camera, so it's low quality these days. But I need to dig that up and show that to you.
I have to see it. I love.
You would love it.
Like that.
It's amazing. Yeah. Anyway.
My favourite all-time You've Been Framed clip is 2 kids in a little electronic car that they are driving together, and the oldest sister's driving and the little brother's in the passenger seat, and she accelerates too fast and he falls out the back of the car, and then she literally reverses the car back over him.
Oh my god.
It's the most slapstick, hilarious, and I'm sure he's fine video I've ever seen.
Yeah, wow. That's certainly a thing. Great. Cool. Well, you can find this show in lots of different places that are not You've Been Framed, such as iTunes and Stitcher and Spotify and TuneIn, and any podcasting app that you have. Search This Nintendo Life. You should be able to find us, subscribe to us, review us on iTunes. Like some more reviews coming, and that'd be very good. Yeah, that's going to close us out, I think, for the show. Any words of wisdom, Bally, as we exit into another week of the world as it currently is?
I don't know. I think I'm just getting a bit too used to the lockdown. It's kind of like I've gotten more into my rhythm, and it's feeling a little bit better than it was at the start, maybe.
Yeah, it's weird, but we're hanging in there, and hopefully you are too, and hopefully the podcast is helping you cope. But yeah, we'll be back in a couple of weeks' time with some more video game chatter, talking about Nintendo and other things too. And we'll see you then. Thanks for listening, folks. Bye-bye. The musical interludes used on today's show were the main theme from Streets of Rage 4, copyright .emu 2020, and the Napalm Man stage music from Mega Man 5, copyright Capcom 1992.
But yeah, that's all we got time for this week on the second. Words, brain.
I love how we talk about that as part of the email, and then multiple times in this segment our brains have just died.
I was so close to the end, and it just...
no, it's just fucking tripping at the fucking cliff edge.
But that's all we've got time for emails this week. Where's this pause coming from? What am I saying after that's all we've got time for emails?
Join us. I'll just say, join us in the end of this segment. Join us after the break.
That's all I have to say.
Fucking something.
Okay, here we go.
All right, here we go.